It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulson with you. All right, let's wrap up a couple of other offensive things and then pop into the defense a little bit. The one area that's gotten, I think, fairly consistent praise is the run game. Now, It is training camp, but I trust your eye on this more than anything we could possibly see from the sidelines in our one watch from the world's worst angles. But the results seem to be there. But what have you seen in the run game, and do you think it's stuff that, by your experience, can translate into the regular season?
Yeah, I really do. I've been really impressed, and it's kind of changed my philosophy after watching this about what it takes to cultivate a good run game. I used to be a believer you got to have the pads on, you got to have the helmets on, you got to be hitting guys. They didn't do that all offseason. And then they came in, what was that, 2 Fridays ago now? It was about a week ago. And they came out and put the gauntlet down from a run game standpoint and really did an excellent job. And I think that has just continued. And, everyone talks about 9-on-7, how the defense is looking good in 9-on-7. That's a defensive drill. So in that drill and those drills, I'm looking for more combinations and how those guys and how they sync. And then again, the kind of relationships between the offensive linemen and the physical approach and the physical mindset. And when you watch that period specifically, it's pretty impressive. I think it's pretty impressive where they're at from a run game standpoint. And I think, they have a whole bunch. We can't really talk too much schematically about what they're doing because of the media agreement with the team. But they're doing kind of multiple different types of runs stylistically. They've obviously got a little RPO in there, which everybody knew they were going to do. And I actually think those are their least efficient looking runs, but because guys are unblocked, in an RPO, you got to read one guy. But on the runs where everyone's blocked, guys seem to know where the targets are going. They're creating great movements against a very good defensive front. And I think it's something that they're going to be able to hang their hat on. And it's funny, and I mentioned this before, and I'm going to say it again. As they've gotten better at blocking those runs, the pass protection and the physicality and the pass protection is getting better. And I think that when you look at that first offensive line right now, especially, and we should probably talk about this should be its own thing, but with Chris Paul coming to that lineup, that starting five is starting to look like a really nice group. Cosme is occasionally losing to Deron Payne, but in the one-on-one settings, he's doing a great job. He's blocking well. I think he's going to continue to progress. You feel good about him. Wiley's actually, I think, done a really nice job improving on some of the power bull rush stuff that I was worried about early. It's not perfect, but it's definitely getting better. Gates is a big physical son of a gun. Chris Paul might be the strongest dude on the team. When he puts his hands on people, he's in positions that aren't very leveraged, advantaged. He's kind of tall or whatever, and he's able just to kind of lift John Allen out of a spot. And when he's working with Leno, they're able to create some tremendous movement. So I think that starting five, all of a sudden, you add John Bates as kind of that extension of the offensive line, is looking pretty good. It's just, to me, it's super interesting. It's super interesting to see how far they've come in the last, 5 practices or so.
Yeah, I was going to ask, but I feel like I know the answer. Is the position battle over at left guard? Is Chris Paul already the starter? I know that Sadiq, I don't know that Ron's going to say that yet because Sadiq is still coming back from injury and he's still playing some. I think today he was back out there and had a couple reps with the ones, but largely it was Paul. And to see the difference is the evidence is there. I just don't know how, based off availability and based off what you actually see when they're out there, how you possibly go back to Sadiq at this point, because it's also not like Sadiq is sitting on some resume. The only thing Sadiq has over Chris Paul is draft position. They used a third rounder on him, but that was a long time ago at this point. And he's never, despite getting the opportunities you get as being a third round pick, he's never actually been able to stay on the field. And when he's been on the field, he's been very, very inconsistent. So he doesn't have a lot of experience. The draft pick, resource allocation argument is I would say expired. Yeah. And at that point, what reason would there be to not start Chris Paul?
Yeah, after watching him since Sadiq's calf injury, I don't have a lot of reason why I would go with Sadiq. I think Sadiq's maybe a better athlete, but I think when I look at him Chris from like a pass protection standpoint, from like a combination standpoint. He's not the most fleet of foot guy. He's not a bad athlete, but Sadiq's an exceptional athlete in terms of movement skills. But I just think Sadiq is much more, or not Sadiq, Chris Paul is much more consistent, like down to down. Like we talked about early on, how Sadiq was having a really hard time consistently even stalemating with John, right? And it was just kind of like John was just creating a ton of pressure. He was winning every third rep, which is not a great ratio for an offensive lineman. And then I thought, well, that's just John. Like John would do that to anybody he's practicing against every day. And then Chris comes in, and John is still having great practices, but it's just gotten so much more quiet. And the pressures, the wins are like more. They look more like NFL wins, which are kind of muddy, right? Chris is fighting, John's fighting. There's a little bit of pressure. The quarterback's kind of got to shift away from it, but the ball's out, as opposed to these like lightning quick wins that Sadiq was giving up to John like every day. And so I think that to me, again, like I don't know if it's a big enough sample size. You could make an argument that, hey, Sadiq got him early in training camp, whatever. But like, it's just been way more consistent, way more professional looking when Chris is in there. And, they have access to all the meetings. They have access to all this stuff in the film room. And maybe Sadiq is doing an excellent job in there. I have no idea. And they feel really comfortable about what he does from a mental standpoint. But at least from practice production, I would say I'm in Chris Paul's camp right now, in terms of a guy that I think makes this group better. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's hard to disagree with that. The thing is that people, I think, need to understand just from a human capital management standpoint is there's no reason to rush to make decisions until you have to make decisions.
Right.
I realize that makes all of us antsy. And there are times where you cross a threshold that, like, for instance, with a starting quarterback, where there's such a wide impact on the rest of the team, if there's indecision there, it can be good to get certainty, right? But on something like a left guard on two guys between two rookie contracts, there's no reason to land the plane prematurely.
Right.
Like you keep your options open, because what happens if you name Chris Paul your starter, like definitively, right? Like you do all the same stuff otherwise. It's just a verbal proclamation, right? But you're giving him all the reps, you're treating him as the starter, but you don't, when you're asked about it, it's like, we're still letting that battle play out. Then you say, all right, he's the starter. He gets hurt or he has a bad week, and you're like, I don't know. Going back, like, do you lose Sadiq mentally? Like, there's all this like psychology that goes into this stuff that just means you don't. And to me, like, it's just don't make a decision before you have to. Where you could lose a guy, you could set someone back, whatever. Just keep all your options open, let it play out. When it gets to the point you have to make a decision based off of, hey, it's week 1 or hey, it's the week before, and we need to like actually make a decision because there's urgency to that, then you make the decision and you move forward. So I know everyone's in a rush to know everything, but like there's actually not a deadline here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, with Chris specifically, because of how raw he was technically last year, like I would expect him to look really good the more reps he gets against the defense. So if I'm kind of waiting for something for Chris, if there's any kind of question, it would just be how's he going to look in the first preseason game, and then how's he going to look against Baltimore? Like, does he play with the same consistency against someone that he doesn't see every day and doesn't have a plan for? Because, you mentioned it's pretty even, and I agree it's pretty even, but Sadiq has at least played significant time as an NFL starter for, we're talking significant, like 3 to 5 games, whatever it is.
I don't know if I would go significant. He's played some.
But Chris hasn't. He's played 1 game.
Sure.
In a game that doesn't really mean anything. So, there's the experience factor. And again, I would be willing to make that proclamation now, just having watched them. But again, I'm not in the meeting room. But if there's an argument to wait, it's that you've got 2 kind of really important data points coming up very quickly. Right. The Cleveland game, for example, and then the Baltimore practices. And I would imagine Chris is going to do great in both those. And so to me, after that, there wouldn't be any reason not to kind of say, hey, Chris, you've earned this opportunity and you're doing a great job.
Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.